A lot of Miami Dolphins news that we need to discuss on this episode of Dolphins Today. I am Nic Rohloff. We're going to take a look at Miami Dolphins OTAs on day one. Got started Tuesday, May 27th. We'll take a look at who stood out at practice. We'll also talk about some other highlights from OTAs. Jalen Ramsey, did he drop a hint on when he is going to be traded? Is it already a done deal? We'll talk about that. Plus, Chris Grier and the Dolphins made a roster move. We'll talk about that. But we're going to start with Jalen Ramsey, actually, because he dropped a subtle hint on social media Tuesday morning that I think needs to be discussed because a lot of people are trying to figure out what this means, and I'll give my 2 cents on the matter. He sent out a very, very simple tweet on early Tuesday, May 27th, just saying 5. ... Now, why is this something that people are going to talk about? Well, one, his jersey number is number 5, but I think it's for a different reason here, folks. When you think of why he tweeted out 5, what is in 5 days from May 27th? June 1st, Sunday, which is also the day that the Miami Dolphins will start getting trade talks really ramped up because of the cap situation in Jalen Ramsey's contract, where it just gives Miami so much more relief on June 1st. Talk more about that here in a second. But make sure you do follow me over on Twitter at Nic_Rohloff. I talk about everything Miami Dolphins, reacting to that tweet, for example. But when Ramsey ultimately does get traded, we will break that down with a video, but we'll have the news on Twitter first. So give me a follow at Nic_Rohloff. All right, but let's talk more about Jalen Ramsey and what that tweet could ultimately mean. I think there might be a handshake deal already done because the Dolphins' cap situation is so heavily influenced by when Ramsey's trade becomes official in terms of the dead cap hit to the salary cap relief in 25 and 2026. Miami is waiting to make the trade until after June 1st. There's no doubt about that. I think they probably had discussions over draft weekend, and if there was a good enough offer out there, they would be willing to make the deal then, but there wasn't. So they held on, and then once the draft concluded, yeah, it makes sense to wait until at least after June 1st. And maybe there is already a trade in place that hasn't been finalized, hasn't been reported or shared to NFL insiders that pretty much is done. And I mentioned this cap table and the relief Miami gets by waiting till after June 1st to trade Ramsey. Well, here is where we stand. As of right now, filming this on Tuesday, May 27th, the cap situation for Miami, they have $13.7 million in space. That includes, by the way, the signing of their rookie class. I am unsure if they've signed Jonah Savaiinaea yet, the second-round pick. I don't think that's been announced, so maybe he's still out there unsigned right now. But they currently have some decent room at 13.7. If they trade Ramsey post-June 1st, where this is ultimately heading, they clear $9.9 million in cap space for 2025 and also save about $6 million in 2026. So you would now then have $23.6 million in cap space to work with to sign in Asante Samuel Jr., Rasul Douglas, other free agents out there that Miami needs to address in that secondary, maybe some offensive line depth. So the Dolphins will be waiting until after June 1st, and it makes sense when you see that much cap come off the books. And obviously, if you traded him before June 1st, it would be dumb because your dead cap hit jumps up about $12 million. So why would Miami do that? But when we talk about a handshake deal might be already done, these are the 5 most likely teams that I think will ultimately trade for Jalen Ramsey. The Los Angeles Rams are the number 1 option without a question. They've been the most linked team to Ramsey. Sean McVay has spoken very highly of potentially adding Ramsey. They are desperate in terms of needing a cornerback. That depth chart in their secondary is absolutely atrocious. The Cowboys have jumped up the list since Jeremy Fowler reported late last weekend that there could be interest between the Cowboys trading for Ramsey. They are dealing with Trayvon Diggs' excuse me. But Cameron Wolf mentioned the Falcons and Panthers as teams that Ramsey could be interested in going to due to his connection with Raheem Morris, the head coach of Atlanta, and then Elijah Evero, the defensive coordinator in Carolina. So these are the teams I think most likely to trade for Ramsey. But I do think a deal could already be in place, and they're just waiting till June 1st to process and announce it due to the cap situation Miami is facing. So let me know your thoughts. Is a deal already done? Will the Jalen Ramsey trade be announced on June 1st? And it's just like, oh, wow, this really has been done for multiple weeks now. They were just waiting for the deadline to pass. Type Y if you think it was. Type N if you think it won't. I don't know if it will be announced actually on June 1st, but I'm willing to bet it's announced by June 3rd. I am. We're filming this on May 27th. By this time next week, you're talking June 2nd, you're talking June 3rd, maybe June 4th. I mean, it's going to be done. There is no reason for this to be extended anymore. And if you are a team trading for Jalen Ramsey, most teams are starting OTAs this week or already have done 2 weeks of OTAs. Miami starts this week, obviously, where Ramsey is not there. But if your team, you want Ramsey in your building, starting to work with your staff, work with your team, get ready for mandatory minicamp in early June. So I do think a trade will happen in the first 72 hours, as to say, from Sunday, June 1st. We'll just ultimately see to where and what the compensation is for the Fins. Segue into the roster move Miami made now, because they did make one on Tuesday afternoon. They signed Ryan Cooper Jr. and placed corner Jason Maitre on the injured reserve list. These two names should sound really familiar, specifically Ryan Cooper Jr., and we'll start with talking about him prior, because he was actually added to this roster on February 24th, 2025, when the Seahawks waived him, and then the Dolphins claimed him. Now, he was actually waived by the Miami Dolphins on May 8th to make room for a different free agent that they added to their roster. He was a UDFA in 2024 out of Oregon State, signed a futures contract with Miami at the start of the year, and then was released. Now, what does this mean for Jason Maitre? Because if you are placed on IR, you are now done. It's an unfortunate rule, but when it's this early in the offseason, if you get placed on injured reserve, it ends your year. So he will not be playing football in the year of 2025, which is a little bit of a bummer for him, because he was someone that I wouldn't say had a real chance to make the 53-man roster, but with a strong preseason training camp, I wouldn't rule it out of the realm of possibility. This is a player Miami signed in 2024 as an undrafted free agent, played for Boston College and Wisconsin in his career, and he was on the Dolphins practice squad the entire 2024 season. So it wasn't like a player that was off then on. No, he was on and in this organization for an entire year, which showcases that Miami likely wanted him to at least come around for a second training camp. And then they signed him to an $840,000 futures contract in the offseason to ensure he would be invited to training camp in July and in August. And it's a real bummer that he ultimately isn't going to be someone that has a chance to make this roster. Now, for people asking when he is what is the injury for Maitre, at filming this on Tuesday, there is no actual information on what the injury is. We just know he was placed on IR, and unfortunately his season is over. Now, the cornerback room isn't going to look much different. We just really replaced Jason Maitre, who did some nice stuff in the nickel during the preseason last year, to Ryan Cooper Jr., and you still have a lot of young players like B.J. Adams, the UDFA out of Central Florida, Ethan Robinson, the UDFA out of Minnesota, the draft pick 5th rounder Jason Marshall Jr. What I will say is, when you look at this depth chart, is that you're going to see a lot of change here. By this time next week, I don't think Jalen Ramsey's face will be on that roster and that depth chart no more, right? So then who becomes your CB1 on the boundary? Is it going to be Cam Smith? Is it going to be Storm Duck? Or will they ultimately sign a free agent corner to replace Ramsey, whether it is Asante Samuel Jr., Rasul Douglas, Stephon Gilmore, James Bradbury, Mike Hilton, and he will now be one of the top corners. There is going to be a lot of turnover in this secondary from now until the start of the season on September 8th. So it is going to be interesting and something that we are going to have to pay attention to, which is why you subscribe to the channel. Currently at 70,090 subs. We're 10 away from 70,100. Let's get there on today's show. We drop Miami Dolphins content on a daily basis, break down the latest news, rumors, and everything in between. So join the channel to never miss a beat of Dolphins coverage. We're going to close out today's show with talking about some OTA news, and I will be honest, I'm a little disappointed because you have 3 days of OTAs this week. the 27th, the 28th, and then the 30th. And then you have 3 days next week, the 2nd, the 3rd, and then the 5th of June. Now, it's a rule across the NFL to where you are only allowed to have media there at one practice or one OTA per week. It was not the opening day, so we have very limited actual takeaways from the first day of voluntary offseason team activities, but there are a couple things we can discuss. One of them being this. They shared a video clip of the past couple of weeks of Dolphins players being at headquarters doing some drills, and one of the things that stood out in that multi-long minute video is that Jalen Phillips was seen running the hoop drill alongside Bradley Chubb. Why is this awesome to see? Well, one, Jalen Phillips is returning from a torn ACL that he suffered week 4 against the Tennessee Titans last year, and then the torn Achilles from 2 years ago. But him already doing the hoop drill is a pretty good sign of his progress this offseason. But also, the Dolphins made the trade and extension of Bradley Chubb a couple of years ago to fortify this edge group alongside Jalen Phillips. We just haven't seen them on the football field together since damn near, the 2022 season? Like, it's crazy to say it's been really that long as a collective group, at least early 2023, I suppose. You have those two alongside Chop Robinson, and you have the ability to have one of the best edge departments in the entire NFL. I'm excited to see those two work together on the football field, and it's already nice to see them doing drills in practice together this early in the offseason. But also some news from first day of OTAs. This one being reported by the Dolphins. How about this? As you know, with the orange jersey signifying who had a strong practice or a strong first couple offseason programs, how about Jalen Phillips being one of those players, but a double jersey, Ethan Bonner, someone who got a lot of hype last offseason in OTAs, minicamp, as well as training camp and in the preseason. So 2 orange jerseys being donned on the first day of Dolphins OTAs, that being Jalen Phillips and Ethan Bonner. Very fascinating that those two were the players that got to rock the jerseys. All right, we're going to wrap up today's show here in a second, but make sure you get your Dolphins gear, especially when it's on sale. Clearance this Dolphins hoodie at chatsports.com/Dolphins sale. Link is in the description and comments of today's video. Take advantage of this being on sale. Almost half off. It actually is half off. Sizes in stock. Get yours today. One more time, chatsports.com/Dolphins sale. All right, let's talk about this real quick before we get out of here onto this segment of Dolphins Today. Some important storylines that will be something I'm watching as well as you should be aware of as well over these next 2 weeks. Cam Smith versus Storm Duck. We talk about the Dolphins secondary and how Jalen Ramsey is not going to be here. Well, who's going to be that CB2 who steps up? Because Kader Oko is going to be in the nickel. I don't foresee them really moving him to the outside. And I would forecast and I would pine for the Dolphins signing 2 corners in free agency, or at least trading for one and signing one. But will they? I don't know. They're at least doing one. So Cam Smith, the year 3 corner, Storm Duck, the year 2 UDFA, they competed last year at the end of the year for playing time in the regular season. Which one comes up ahead early in OTAs and minicamp over the next month to see who gets first crack at being that boundary CB2 going into training camp in the preseason? That's going to be interesting. Also got to focus on the safety room. We don't know who the starters are going to be. Like Brian Duker, the defensive pass game coordinator and secondary coach, talked about how Melifonwu, Davis, McMorris, Elijah Campbell, Dante Trader Jr., all of them will be competing for a starting role. So is there going to be 2 safeties that come out of the pack a little bit early here in OTAs? That's going to be an important one. But another one is O-line configuration. Who is going to be on that first O-line team reps? And where are they going to be located? Because you know that it's likely going to be, in some order, Patrick Paul, Jonah Savinaya, James Daniels, Aaron Brewer, and Austin Jackson. But is Savinaya right guard in between Brewer and Austin Jackson? Or is he at left guard next to fellow first-time, full-time starter Patrick Paul? Is Daniels going to be that veteran kind of helping smooth Patrick Paul's first year as a starter at left guard and left tackle? Maybe that's what I would do. But what do the Dolphins coaching staff do, and what do they do early in the offseason? I would have it be from left to right, Paul, Daniels, Brewer, Savvy, Nia Jackson. Let's see what Miami starts off the offseason with. I'm fascinated to see that. And to round out the show completely today, I can't mention anything without Tyreek Hill because, boy, oh boy, does he just continue to make headlines. Tyreek was on stream with Aiden Ross, and I think his name's Neon. I don't know. I don't pay attention to these streamers, but said some harsh things about Buffalo Bills fans, which I could get behind. But also called Travis Hunter ass. Why do you need to do that, Tyreek? There's just no need. No need for that. It just feels childish. He also talked about how he wants 2,000 yards again this year or wants to get there. If the Dolphins and Tyreek Hill get 2,000 yards, I will argue that is a bad thing for the Miami Dolphins because they should have a more well-balanced offense. And if they force-feed Tyreek to 2,000 yards, it's probably not a good thing for their overall offense and overall record. He did say that he wasn't in the right training mentality this past weekend, last season, and he's bouncing back, so let's hope that. But, I mean, it's just hard to take anything this guy says seriously, unfortunately. I wish I could talk about what he says more seriously, but it's hard to do that because he just says some nonsense all the time, and it's exhausting, if we're going to be honest. It is. I get tired of it. It's sickening. Can't wait till he's off the team. I really believe that. I would trade him. That's just me. I've been very open about thinking that. But that will do it for today's show. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us and watching this episode of Dolphins Today. Subscribe if you want more Dolphins content because we're going to continue to bring you weekly live shows and daily Dolphins coverage. So join the channel today.